I never thought I'd be sharing something like this on Reddit, but here I am. I'm a 34-year-old guy named Tom, and I've been married to my wife Jessica for 7 years. We don't have any kids, so it's always been just the two of us. We had what I thought was a solid marriage, until recently. Jessica started taking more and more Uber rides about 6 months ago. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd always been social, and I figured she was just spending more time with friends or running errands. But then, things started to seem strange. She began using the same driver, a guy named Mark, pretty frequently. I remember her talking about him, how nice he was, and how they'd chat during her rides. I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just friendly small talk. Over time, her rides became longer, and she'd often be vague about where she'd been or what she was doing. Her phone was constantly glued to her hand, and she was getting increasingly defensive whenever I asked about her plans. I tried to shake it off as her being busy, or maybe having some new social circle I wasn't aware of. But my gut told me something was wrong. One evening, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow her after she left for one of her usual rides. I knew it was invasive, but something felt terribly off. As I followed her, I saw her get into Mark's Uber. I thought maybe they were just friends or there was some innocent explanation. But what happened next shattered my world. I followed Jessica and Mark's Uber for a while, trying to stay inconspicuous. They ended up at a secluded park on the edge of town. My heart was pounding in my chest as I parked a distance away and watched. Jessica and Mark got out of the car and walked toward a hidden spot near some trees. I couldn't see clearly from where I was, but I could tell they were talking closely. And it didn't seem like a casual conversation. I decided to get closer, hoping I was jumping to conclusions. As I approached, I saw that they were sitting together, but it was what happened next that was beyond anything I had imagined. Jessica and Mark began to kiss. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just a friendly chat. My wife was cheating on me. My mind was racing. I couldn't believe it. I watched in disbelief as they moved to the back of the Uber. Through the window, I saw them get intimate. They were having sex in the back of the car, right there in front of me. I was paralyzed with shock and anger. I wanted to confront them, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just stood there, feeling my world crumble. When Jessica finally left Mark's car, she looked disheveled, but seemed blissfully unaware of how much I'd seen. She got back into the Uber, and I could barely contain my rage. I waited until she was gone before I made my way back to my car, my mind a whirlwind of betrayal and pain. When I got home, Jessica was already there, acting like everything was normal. I couldn't confront her right away. I needed time to process everything. But I knew I couldn't just let this go. The next few days were a blur. I was consumed by anger and confusion. I couldn't focus on work, and I was barely speaking to Jessica. She noticed, of course, and started to get worried, but I kept up the pretense of being stressed from work. One evening, I decided it was time to confront her. I wanted to hear her side of the story before making any decisions. Jessica came home from another Uber ride, and I sat her down in the living room. I was calm on the outside, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. "Jessica, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tom, what's wrong? You've been acting so distant," she replied, feigning concern. "I know about you and Mark," I said, cutting to the chase. Her face went pale, and I could see the panic in her eyes. "I saw you with him, having sex in his car." Her initial shock quickly gave way to defensive anger. "What? That's ridiculous. How could you even think that?" she spat, her voice rising. "I saw it with my own eyes, Jessica. "Don't lie to me," I said, struggling to keep my composure. She burst into tears, her demeanor shifting rapidly. "Tom, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I never meant for it to happen this way," she sobbed, clutching her chest. "Mark and I—" "Save it. I'm done listening to your excuses," I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "You've betrayed me, and I can't just forget about it." She tried to plead with me, her tone shifting between remorseful and enraged. "You don't understand. It was just a fling. I didn't mean to hurt you." I felt a wave of cold anger wash over me. "You think this is just a fling? You've been seeing him for months. I've seen the way you act when you're with him." Jessica's hysteria reached new heights. "How could you do this to me? I'm the one who's been hurt here," she screamed, her face flushed with fury. I couldn't take any more of her lies and theatrics. I decided then and there that I was filing for divorce. I couldn't stay in a relationship built on such betrayal. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal advice and emotional turmoil. I contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process and began gathering evidence of Jessica's infidelity. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about reclaiming control over my life. Jessica continued her frantic attempts to convince me to reconsider. She begged and pleaded, sending constant texts and calling me. But I was resolute. I had already made up my mind, and I wasn't going to be swayed by her manipulative cries. One evening, I was at home sorting through paperwork when Jessica showed up unexpectedly. She'd apparently managed to get the key to the house and let herself in. Her face was tear-streaked, and she looked desperate. "Tom, please, just listen to me," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but we can work through this. We can fix it." I looked at her with a mixture of pity and anger. "Jessica, you had multiple chances to be honest and faithful, and you chose not to. You betrayed me in the worst possible way." I know," she cried. "But it was a moment of weakness. I'm willing to do anything to make it right. Please, just give us one more chance." Before I could respond, Mark showed up at the door. He looked as disheveled as Jessica, and his expression was one of unease. "Jessica, we need to talk," he said, trying to sound calm. Jessica's face turned to shock, and then to anger as she saw Mark. "What the hell is he doing here?" she shouted, her eyes wide. "I invited him," I said calmly. "I wanted you both to hear this together. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm done with all the lies and deceit." Mark looked awkwardly at Jessica, who was now screaming at him. "You were just a distraction, Mark. You don't even know what you've done." Mark tried to say something, but the conversation quickly devolved into a shouting match. Jessica was hysterical, throwing accusations and insults at both Mark and me. The scene was chaotic, with her emotions swinging wildly between anger and desperation. Finally, I had enough. "This is over, Jessica. You've made your choices, and now you need to deal with the consequences." Jessica's screams grew faint as I shut the door on the drama. It was clear that the process was going to be messy, but I was determined to see it through. The next chapter of my life was beginning, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The divorce proceedings were tumultuous, filled with heated arguments and legal battles. Jessica continued to try and manipulate the situation, using every trick she knew to delay the process and cause more distress. She even tried to argue that I was at fault for her affair. But the evidence was clear, and the court saw through her attempts. Throughout the process, Jessica's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would show up at my workplace unannounced, crying and begging for another chance, but I remained firm in my decision. I was done with the deceit and drama. Mark, on the other hand, disappeared from the picture as quickly as he had entered it. I never heard from him again, and he became a footnote in the story of Jessica's betrayal. It was clear he wanted nothing more to do with the mess he'd become entangled in. The final decree came through, and the divorce was finalized. I felt a mix of relief and sadness as I signed the papers. The relationship that I thought was solid had ended in betrayal and chaos, and it was hard to accept that it was truly over. Jessica eventually moved out of the house, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my life. It was a challenging period, but I began to focus on myself and what I wanted for the future. Friends and family supported me, and their encouragement helped me through the rough patches. In the end, I learned a lot about trust, resilience, and the importance of standing up for oneself. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm ready to embrace it with a new sense of clarity and purpose. Jessica, on the other hand, had to face the consequences of her actions. The last I heard, she was trying to rebuild her life, but it was clear that the damage had been done. The affair with Mark had left scars, and the road to recovery was long and painful. As for me, I'm moving forward. I've taken the lessons learned from this painful chapter and used them to become stronger and more self-aware. Life may have thrown me a curveball, but I'm determined to navigate it with integrity and hope for a better future.